Hey, so today's tutorial is all going to be about the Logic Drummer that comes as a plugin in Logic Pro X. It's a fantastic way of getting live drums on your tracks, especially if you can't afford the studio time, or you don't really know any drummers, or you're really struggling to get real live drums on your tracks. And the only other options for you are to piece together loads of loops and samples, or pay a drummer and pay for studio time, or to spend hours and hours laboriously piecing together programmed drums and sticking them on your tracks. This is a bit of a shortcut, and it's a fantastic way of getting a real live drummer on your tracks as quickly as possible. And if you use it right, it can sound really effective. This is one of my library tracks that I've got here. It's one of my Southern rock tracks that I write a lot of music for TV and adverts and films and websites, and this is a Southern rock track of mine. All these parts down the bottom in blue are all live guitars, acoustic, bass and keys, and all of these orange bits up at the top are Logic drummer tracks, and I've managed to piece them all together to get like quite a good sounding arrangement of drums. And this little short series of tutorials is hopefully designed to show you what it is, how to get it on your tracks, and more importantly, how to get it sounding good, because it doesn't just come out of the box sounding as neat and polished and crisp as this. You actually have to spend quite a bit of time tweaking it. I'm going to show you loads of tricks and tips in order to do that. So let's start at the beginning. I thought what I'd do is I'd load up an older version, or a version that I've stripped off the drums. Let's close this. So here we have the track without the huge amount of drums up at the top. There's one drummer track here, but it's kind of a here's what I made earlier type thing that I'm going to show you in a minute what we're going to do with that. What is the Logic Drummer? The Logic Drummer is if you press plus on here. So I've got this track, I've recorded it to a click. That is a really, really important thing. If you're using the Logic Drummer, you need to record to a click track. The Logic Drummer works on the tempo of your track, and if you've mucked around with the tempo and not recorded it to a click track, it's not going to work getting Logic drums on your track. But if you have, then this is the way forward. So number one, you press the little plus button, and you'll have noticed usually it asks you for things like software, instrument, that's straightforward, MIDI instruments, audio channels, there's settings for guitar and bass, and there's external MIDI if you've got any external keyboards or synths you want to trigger. But the one that we're interested in is in the top right, and it's drummer. And you may or may not have clicked on it, or somebody may have told you about it, but you don't really know what it is. So here's what it is. You can click on drummer, and there are several different genres here. And there are a brief list of genres that you can stick on your tracks. So this track is a bit of a Southern rock track, so I'm going to stick to rock up at the top. If I'd written like an electronic track or some hip-hop thing, or I want some percussion on, you can obviously click on the different ones, and we'll be exploring those later on. But for the meantime, we're going to click on this rock one at the top, and we're going to click create. And what it does is it creates a brand new track here. It's just a stereo track, and it pre-populates it with a drum kit, and it has this little thing down the bottom here. And what we can do is we can just drag it so it starts off when our track starts off. Before we get into this part down the bottom here, if you press Y, you'll notice if I've got my drums track selected on the left, there is a few menu options here which are quite cool to start off with. First thing is you can choose a drummer, and this is a little bit cheesy, but Logic have done it like this, so let's just go with it. But each genre has a list of different types of drummers, and they've all got snazzy names like Jasper and Ronnie and Julian and Magnus. So rock, and if you look on rock, there's a little description to the right hand side of each of the drummers to tell me what type of drummer they are. So you've got a Britpop one down here, funk rock, punk rock, and you'll notice when you start to stick them in your tracks that they have kind of rinsed certain drummers. So the funk rock one does tend to sound a lot like Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers, and then kind of punk rock is that proper 90s, 2000s, like Blink 182, Green Day kind of sound. There's like a proper retro one on here. So we're going to go for this guy in the middle, Anders. And he's got a nice little bandana here. But it tells you, influenced by heavy riffing rock bands, Anders plays grinding beats on a massive sounding kit. That's the kind of thing we want. And underneath on the drum kit are loads of different types of drum kits. And if you've never mucked around with Logic, there's little presets for drum kits you can choose. The one for this track that I decided I was going to go with was this SoCal one. And it will come up here on our... So we've got Anders here. And if we go to our actual track here and double click on the drummer, we've got our SoCal kit loaded up here. And if you click on any bits of the kit, you can actually hear what they sound like. If you do want to swap out any of these instruments, so you might want to click on the snare. There's some other options for snares, but actually we're going to come into some much more detailed options for this in a bit. So we're actually just going to leave it on the settings it's on at the moment. And if we press play, there's a real basic drum track on top of what I've recorded already. That does not sound good right now. And what you may have noticed, and one of the most frustrating things when you first started trying to use this drummer track, is that the track I played you at the start sounded crisp, sounded really interesting, sounds as if those drums belonged with the track. This at the moment sounds flat, it doesn't really fit, it's not really popping, it doesn't come out of the mix a lot, it doesn't sound good at the moment. So we need to fix this. First of all, we're going to be talking about arranging our drum track. And what I mean by arranging is it comes pre-populated with this little 8-bar loop. And if I click the plus button at the end, it'll invent another 8 bars. And these little bars, you can create them as long or as short as you want. So for example, this first section here, this first 4 bars is my intro. Then the track kicks in and I've got an 8-bar section here. So what I've done with my drummer track is I've made the first bit 4 bars, and the second bit 8 bars, and you can even use your scissor tool to kind of chop tracks in the middle if you want, or even merge them back together. And how to get this sounding a bit more interesting, because there's a load of different rhythms that are built in for this particular drummer, Anders. Let's just solo him for the time being and just have a listen to what we can do with him. If you press E, it brings up this little editor down the bottom here, and it's really intuitive. There's a little ball that goes on this little square that goes from loud to soft, simple to complex. And what that does is if you make it louder, the part is going to be loud. If you make it softer, it's going to be softer. If you go to simple, it's going to be a bit pared back. And if you go to complex, it's going to get really busy very quickly. I'll show you what that means. Let's just have a listen to it in default setting. Let's make it louder. Or quieter. Complex. Or simple. So you can see already just that has given us a bit of scope. Over the right hand side there are some interesting things. You can click and unclick different parts of the kit, which I'll come back to in a second. Down the bottom right hand corner, this is where we're interested in right straight away. And there is a little load of dots here. And what they are is a pre-programmed set of, on Anders, there happen to be 6 drum patterns that were already programmed in. So if I click on one, So there's already several drum and snare patterns built in there. We're going to stick on number 1 actually, because we want a really simple stripped back sounding kit. You'll also notice there's a half time one here and there's a double time one here. So if you go half time, you can get that real overblown middle 8 rock thing. Or if you go double time, it'll give you that real fast punk kind of thing. But anyway, we're going to stick with number 1. What you can also do is you can also set the rhythm for your hi-hats. So you can either have it on simple like 1/8 notes, or you can get your open your hats in these middle ones, and this last one gives you 16th notes. Again, we're going to stick with a simple one to start off with. There are 2 more dials on the right hand side that I want to look at in this little bit. Number 1 is fills, and what fill is you can set it so you can set what kind of fill you want at the end of your section. So you can have like a real short little fill to set it down here. You can have no fill at all if you turn it off, or you can have like a real complicated overblown fill. I'll show you what those sound like. So this is kind of set kind of a third of the way along. So it does like a little bit of a fill at the end there. If I crank this right up, you can even see in the waveform that it's got a lot more complicated down here. In fact, let's go all the way up. So there you go. So it gets bigger fills or shorter fills depending on where you put the fill dial. Underneath there is a little thing called swing, and what that does is it slightly swings your notes. So if I turn that up, it'll just like kind of slightly swing the drums. And because we've got like a bit of a swung beat as it is, we're going to turn that up a little bit. And under the bottom, if we click on details, there are some extra little bits here, so we can push or pull the feel, so actually like be slightly ahead of the beat or slightly behind the beat. You can put in more ghost notes or less ghost notes, and your hi-hats are set on automatic, but if you take it off automatic, you can actually set how open you want your hi-hats to be. If I set them in the middle, they sound like this. If I set them all the way down so they're closed, or if I set them all the way open. So you've got a lot of space to muck around with stuff. Let's come back to this section here. So if we click details again, we go back to this part, and you'll notice there's different bits of the kit here. I can actually have the hats, the snare and the kick drum on the go. If I want to, I could, instead of the snare, get them playing the toms. And I could even up the rate that they're going to play the toms as well, like I did with the hi-hats. Or you could just have, instead of your hats, you could have your cymbals instead. And there's 4 little settings for your cymbals as well. That last one's quite full on. So you can have like a real detailed setup here, exactly what you want. What you can also do as well is if you say chop your bar in half, as an intro, you could just have your kick drum and your hats without your snare, and then here you could have your snare coming in. So it's up to you. You can muck around with it to your heart's content. You can also, what you can do is you can change the little fills as well, which is a real good way of making it sound a little bit different, because if you have the same fill every single time, then whoever's listening to it is going to pick up on the fact that you've just programmed the drums instead of getting something that sounds like a real drummer. So what we can do is this first drums, we've got a fill dial set here. Our second section of drums, we're going to set the fill dial up here. So you can get different drum parts, you can get different fills, you can change your loudness and your softness, your simple and your complex. The last little bit that I've not explained yet, in fact there's two bits actually that's really interesting. Number one is at the top there's a little bit for percussion, and what you can do is you can add either tambourine, shaker or claps. So say I put the tambourine in there. Oh yes, sorry, I only added it in the second one. Let's add it in the first one as well. So the first thing you really need to do before you get anywhere with mixing it or making this drum sound better than they do at the moment, because they're just on a stereo channel and it's never going to sound good if you've got all your drums going through one stereo channel. We need to put this on multiple outputs to get it sounding really good, and that's really easy to do. But the first thing that you could really do with doing is mapping out some kind of arrangement for your track. You can always tweak it later on, but you can add little sections and you can try and have it follow what you've already got. A really good thing to do as well is say this section from 25, I know that it's exactly the same as this opening section here for me in this track. So what I might want to do is copy that drum section there to bar 25, and I might just want to tweak it a little this next time. So I might want to make it a little bit more complex, and I might make the fills just a little bit fuller. So it's the same section, but it's just a little bit taken up a notch, like you would get with a real drummer. And the last thing that you can do that I've not explained yet is when you've got your drums here, instead of having these preset values here, there's actually a box above it that says follow. And if I click follow, I can actually choose any instrument that I've recorded. And what it does is it scans the waveform and looks to see where the spikes are in it, so where the rhythm is. So I could set it, say, for my bass part. And what it'll do is it'll try and sync up kicks and snares to fit in with my bass part. Oops. You'll have some luck with this follow thing. Sometimes you won't have that much luck. Depends on how easily it can analyze the actual... In fact, let's try and sync it up with this guitar, see what happens. Let's try this main guitar at the top here. So it's following it, it's working, it's just sounding a little bit too much at the moment. So sometimes that follow is a good thing to use, sometimes just one of the regular ones. So for this first video, that's what the drummer is. That's how to get it on your tracks and how to roughly start to arrange this. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to show you how to put these drum tracks on multiple outputs, how to use effects like compression and overdrive and things on bus channels to get it sounding really good. And lastly, I'm going to talk about using extra drum tracks in order to get some extra percussion and other instruments on there. So for the meantime, hopefully you're a little bit clued up as to what this is. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.